Act 2, Year 1. The Shift. The first year of marriage didn't collapse loudly. There were no explosions, no immediate chaos. On the surface, things looked acceptable. But beneath that surface, something felt wrong almost immediately. In the first few days after the marriage, things seemed relatively fine, at least outwardly. I had reservations, but nothing I could yet point to with certainty. I told myself this was normal. Adjustment takes time. Marriage isn't instant harmony. She hadn't fully moved in with me. She continued to stay in Blackburn because of work and because of Elle's schooling, traveling back and forth on weekends to our family home. On paper, it made sense. But in reality, it created distance, emotional and physical, from the very beginning. If I wanted to see my own wife, I had to phone ahead to check whether she was available. I still remember thinking how strange that felt, a husband needing to make what felt like an appointment just to spend time with his wife and stepdaughter. I didn't question it out loud. I questioned myself instead. My understanding of marriage. I've always seen myself as traditional. I believe in family as a unit, in standing by one another, supporting one another, building something together. Marriage, to me, meant presence, commitment, shared responsibility. What I was experiencing didn't feel like that. She wanted her freedom. And to be clear, she was never made to feel controlled. I never restricted her, never questioned her movements unfairly, never imposed rules. Yet the distance felt intentional, not circumstantial. Weekends that felt temporary. On the weekends when she and Elle stayed over, the house didn't feel like a home being built. It felt temporary and transactional, almost like someone using a hotel or an Airbnb. My mother, then 70 years old, would run around tending to her needs, cooking, cleaning, trying her best to be welcoming. I often had to stop Mum from overdoing it. She would exhaust herself trying to make my wife comfortable. What troubled me most was that this effort wasn't reciprocated, not emotionally, not conversationally, not relationally. Our conversations were few and far between. I had to initiate everything. How was work? How was your week? Shall I take you out for a meal? And when I did, I got one-word answers. That was the first real shift I noticed. The same one-word responses we later saw so clearly during the Manchester dinner. Back then, I didn't recognize it as a pattern yet. I just felt the distance. The Manchester dinner. That distance crystallized the night I took her for an expensive dinner in Manchester. The drive there was silent. The restaurant was silent. Unless I asked something directly, she didn't speak. And when I did ask, I got one-word replies. When I finally questioned her, she said something that stayed with me. She told me she feeds off other people's energy and couldn't find anything to say to me. She said we had nothing in common. That was within the first year of marriage, not during a crisis, not after years of conflict, but at the beginning. I remember sitting there thinking, how does a marriage survive if one person has already decided there's nothing to connect over, talking about us to outsiders? Another thing I noticed during this first year was her tendency to talk about our private family life to strangers and outsiders. I saw it as deeply wrong. If a married couple has a problem, they should talk to each other, not seek validation, attention, or sympathy from outsiders. I questioned her about this calmly, sincerely. That led to our first real argument. Though argument isn't even the right word. It was one-sided. I asked why she felt the need to speak about our marriage to others. I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't accusatory. I was trying to protect the sanctity of our home. Her reaction was not reflection. It was withdrawal. The first departure. That same Sunday, she left. She took Elle and went back to Blackburn, but not to her family home. She booked herself into a hotel instead. Away from me, away from family, away from any attempt at resolution. This behavior was completely alien to me. My calls weren't answered, my messages weren't replied to. Occasionally, she would tell me she wasn't ready to speak and would be in touch when she could. I didn't know what to think. Was she cheating? I don't know. Was she not in the right frame of mind? Only Allah knows. What I did know was that this wasn't how someone committed to a marriage behaved, especially not in the first year. Year one wasn't about love growing. It was about distance being normalized. It was about a marriage that existed in name, but not in presence. About emotional withdrawal framed as energy. About silence framed as personality. About independence framed as virtue, even when it eroded the idea of family. And without realizing it at the time, I was already doing what I would do for the next several years. Trying to hold a marriage together, while the other person stood half outside it. The first unease, what I noticed in Elle. There was something else I noticed during that first year. Something quieter than the arguments, subtler than the distance between me and my wife, but far more troubling. It wasn't about my marriage, it was about Elle. At first, I couldn't quite place it. I told myself I was overthinking, that children develop at different speeds, that perhaps I was misreading things. But the more time I spent with her, the more uneasy I became. Elle was 9 years old at the time, but her behavior, her understanding, her responses were closer to that of a 4-year-old. Not emotionally immature in a playful way, but developmentally behind in ways that were difficult to ignore. She struggled with simple things. Basic counting, simple maths, elementary problem-solving tasks that children her age usually grasp naturally. When I tried to help her with small learning activities, nothing formal, just gentle interaction, I noticed she became confused quickly. Concepts that should have been familiar to her were not. There was no foundation to build upon. It wasn't frustration I felt, it was concern. A question any responsible adult would ask. Naturally, I raised this with my wife. Not accusingly, not critically, but with genuine concern. I asked her about Elle's schooling, about parents' evenings, about what her teachers had said, about whether any assessments had ever been discussed. Her response stunned me. She told me that she had never attended a single parents' evening for Elle, not once. I remember sitting there in silence, trying to process what I had just heard. A mother who had never attended her child's parents' evenings, never sat with teachers, never asked about progress, and never engaged with her child's education in a structured way. To me, that wasn't a minor oversight. It was a fundamental absence, what I began to understand about the past. As time passed, other details emerged. Not all at once, but slowly, almost accidentally. I learned more about her past social circle. Friends who regularly smoked that illegal substance. Frequent nights involving alcohol. A lifestyle that didn't prioritize structure, routine, or responsibility. And suddenly, the picture began to form. This wasn't just about missed parents' evenings. This was about a pattern of neglect, not born from cruelty, but from self-absorption and misplaced priorities. I began to wonder how many signs had been ignored simply because it was easier not to look. Eventually, I said what needed to be said. I told her calmly and respectfully that Elle might have learning difficulties, that she should be evaluated, that early intervention could make a world of difference, that this wasn't about blame, it was about responsibility. My wife dismissed it outright. There wasn't discussion, no curiosity, no concern, no willingness to explore the possibility. Just dismissal, as if acknowledging the issue would reflect poorly on her, and therefore could not be allowed. That reaction troubled me deeply. I told my mother-in-law. I explained my concerns. I described what I had observed. I spoke about Elle's learning struggles and the lack of school engagement. Her reply shocked me. "You knew about Elle's difficulties before you got married." I didn't. I had never been told. Not before the marriage, not during discussions, not when Elle was introduced into my life, not at any point. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was withheld information, and it wasn't small. The truth that hurt the most. What hurt wasn't that Elle had learning difficulties. That never mattered to me. What hurt was that this had been hidden, as if it was something shameful, something that would make me walk away. The truth is simple, and I say this with complete certainty. I would have loved Elle regardless. I did love Elle regardless. She wasn't a burden to me. She was a child who needed patience, understanding, and stability. And I gave her that. Freely, willingly, sincerely. But hiding something so significant told me something uncomfortable about the environment she had grown up in. It told me that honesty was optional, that appearances mattered more than welfare. That responsibility was often avoided rather than embraced. From that moment onward, my role in the household shifted, even if no one acknowledged it. I became more protective of Elle, more attentive, more aware of her needs, and at the same time, I became more aware of the gaps left by her mother. Year one wasn't just the year I realized my marriage was emotionally hollow. It was the year I realized that a child had been growing up without advocacy, and that I had stepped into that role without ever being told the full truth. That knowledge stayed with me, and it would shape every decision I made in the years that followed. Living in restraint. As the months passed, I found myself living in a state of quiet restraint. Not silence. Restraint. I learned quickly that speaking too much only led to withdrawal. Asking questions led to defensiveness. Expressing concern led to dismissal. So I adjusted, the way men often do when they believe patience will be rewarded. I spoke less. I listened more. I swallowed discomfort. I chose peace over clarity. I told myself that this was maturity, that compromise was part of marriage, that restraint was a virtue, especially in the early days. But restraint, when practiced alone, slowly turns into erasure. One of the most difficult aspects of that first year was the imbalance between responsibility and authority. I was expected to show up, to provide stability, but I had no voice, no say in decisions, no input on structure, no influence over the environment being created. I was responsible for outcomes I was not allowed to shape. This imbalance is subtle at first, but it erodes you quietly. You begin to doubt your instincts. You begin to question whether wanting clarity is unreasonable. You begin to apologize for concern. And I did. Mum's quiet observations. Mum rarely interfered. She never raised her voice. She never criticized my wife openly. But I could see it in her eyes, the concern, the exhaustion, the confusion. She watched me navigate a marriage that didn't feel reciprocal. She watched me return from weekends feeling drained rather than settled. She watched me shoulder responsibility without support. Sometimes she would say gently, "Imran, are you eating properly? Are you sleeping okay?" She never asked directly about the marriage. She didn't need to. Mothers know when something is wrong long before their children admit it to themselves. Faith as a framework for endurance. Throughout that year, my faith played a central role in how I responded. I prayed more. I reflected more. I asked Allah for patience, not escape. I told myself that marriage was a test, that perhaps this difficulty was meant to refine me, that restraint, endurance, and kindness would soften hearts. I didn't see myself as a victim. I saw myself as a man being tested, and so I stayed calm when I felt dismissed. I stayed measured when I felt disrespected. I stayed present when she withdrew, because walking away was never my instinct. What I didn't say out loud. There were things I never said. Not to her, not to Mum, not even to myself at first. That I felt lonely in my own marriage. That I missed warmth. That I felt more like a caretaker than a partner. That I felt I was being tolerated rather than chosen. These thoughts came quietly, usually late at night when the house was still. I didn't dwell on them. I acknowledged them and pushed them aside. I told myself not to be dramatic, not to assign meaning too early, not to judge. But the thoughts didn't disappear. They waited, the slow redefinition of hope. By the end of the first year, my idea of hope had changed. At the beginning, hope meant building a life together, growing emotionally, creating stability for Elle, sharing responsibility, becoming a unit. By the end of year one, hope meant something smaller: peace, predictability, reduced tension. I wasn't hoping for closeness anymore. I was hoping for calm, and that realization, more than any argument or incident, told me something was wrong. Marriage shouldn't shrink your hopes, it should expand them. What year one left behind. Year one didn't break me. It taught me to observe rather than react, to endure rather than confront, to give without expecting return. It also taught me something I didn't want to learn so early: that love alone does not create partnership, that patience alone does not create respect, that silence does not heal disconnection. And as the year closed, I didn't feel defeated. I felt alert, aware that something foundational was missing, aware that the marriage was already imbalanced, aware that I was carrying more than my share, but still hopeful, because I believed, wrongly as it turned out, that awareness plus patience could fix what honesty had not yet been allowed to touch. How year one ended inside me. Year one didn't end with a dramatic breakdown. It ended with confusion, with me questioning myself instead of questioning the situation, with me rationalizing behavior that should have alarmed me, with me telling myself that patience, kindness, and consistency would eventually be met with the same. I still believed, at that stage, that things could settle. I didn't realize yet that this wasn't a rough beginning. It was the template,